Welcome to the Guided Expressions podcast with Martin Williams, the place to learn and be inspired to live your best life. Here is your host, Martin Williams.
And welcome to the Guided Expressions podcast. My name is Martin Williams. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. You may do so on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, and SoundCloud. All the links to the podcast can be found at guidedexpressions.com/podcast. Today, what I wanted to talk to you about is fear. And fear is something that a lot of people deal with. And certainly in this time, we are going through a pandemic in our country and around the world. And a lot of people are gripped by fear. A lot of people are living in fear. And when I say that, I don't mean in terms of taking the precautionary measures as far as wearing masks and wearing gloves and hand sanitizer and all of those things. I'm not when I talk about living in fear, I'm not including those things. To me, that's just being responsible. What I'm talking about is the fear that I see on a lot of people's faces. When I go out during the day, I see a lot of people who are just so afraid, and you can see it in their eyes. They're afraid. And really the fear comes from the fear of the unknown. A lot of people, really none of us really know when this is going to end. We don't know when life will get back to normal, if it will ever get back to normal. Certainly debatable if it will ever be like it was. And that puts a lot of people in a disease state. And when I say disease, a state of not being at ease, nervous, fearful. And it really made me think about fear in general and the things that fear stops us from doing. In my view, I think fear is one of those things that if you allow it to control your life, you really won't experience life to the fullest. I am someone who's dealt with a lot of fear in his life. I've dealt with a lot of fear concerning the fear of rejection, the fear of failure, the fear of the unknown. And I allowed that fear to control my decision making. And when you make decisions from a place of fear, you will more often than not make the wrong decision, because you're not making the decision based on knowledge, okay? Fear is a liar. Fear is a liar. And we all know that the best liars have an element of truth in their lies, right? Their lies are believable. If a person's lies aren't believable, they're not a good liar, okay? Fear is like that. Fear is a liar because fear has believability within its lies. Say, for example, you wanted to go into business for yourself and leave your current job. It seems like a foolish decision, and then fear feeds that thought and says, well, you can't do that because you might lose everything. You might lose your house, you might lose your car, you might lose all the money that you saved up, and then you'd be left with nothing. Now, that's believable because you've seen it happen before with other people. But what you don't know are the circumstances that led to them losing it all. You don't really know what they did in order to get to that point. So it's very difficult to say that the same thing is going to happen to you, just as it's difficult to say, well, this person made $1 million in their business, and that means I'm going to make $1 million too. It doesn't mean that, because you don't know what that person did to make that $1 million. You don't know how hard they worked. You don't know the different avenues they took. You don't know their strategy. You don't know any of that. All you see is the end result. So it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen for you based on the results of another person. So if we look at fear in that way, then fear begins to lose some of its believability, right? You have to kind of deconstruct fear in order to defeat it. Fear, when it shows up, is very hard to defeat because it looks a lot bigger than it actually is. The premise that you're in fear of is a lot bigger than it actually is. And like I said before, fear is a liar. Fear at its core contains a lie. Like I said, it's believable that the bad thing can happen, but what is the likelihood that it will happen? We really don't know. And that's where the fear of the unknown comes in. The fear of the unknown is an effective fear because we really don't know. And so it's based on the unknown. But you can also turn that around and say, well, I don't know what's going to happen, but something good could actually happen out of this. I could lose it all, but I could be wildly successful. I just don't know. Now at that point, you're in a neutral state. You go from being fearful to being neutral. And maybe you're not totally convinced that what you're going to undertake is going to be amazing. But what you do know is if I do a certain series of things in a certain sequence of things in a certain way, I put myself in the probability or likelihood that whatever it is I'm going to undertake is going to work. So let's use the business aspect again. If I produce a product that works or a service that works, and if I serve customers well, and if I'm honest in business, I don't try to steal from anyone, if I innovate, meaning constantly improve my existing product or service, I am more likely to succeed than fail. It's really that simple. And when I make that determination in my mind, I am less likely to be fearful because I'm working with a set of laws. I'm working with a set of steps. And I know that if I follow these steps, I'm much more likely to succeed versus not. I think one of the reasons that people can't ever move past their fear is that they don't take the time to deconstruct their fear like I just did. Let's try another one. Let's say you're afraid to approach people, approach strangers when you're out. Because the fearful part of you says, well, that person doesn't want me to talk to them. And they might think I'm crazy. They might think there's something wrong with me. They might think that I'm desperate. They might think, right? So it's like fear, this lists all the reasons why you shouldn't go and approach that person. And the reality is, you don't know that person. You don't know their personality. You don't know anything about them. And they may be very receptive to what you have to say. And then on the other hand, instead of thinking, well, it might not be a positive interaction, think about the positive outcomes that could come from it. You can meet a new friend. You can meet a new business partner. You can meet a new customer or client. Or you could just have a pleasant interaction and leave it at that. But all of those things are better than that fearful expectation that you had at the outset. So you deconstruct the fear. instead of letting fear give you all these reasons, because the more reasons you get in any direction, that's the direction you're going to go. If you have more reasons that it's going to fail, then it's going to succeed. You're going to go in the direction of failure, right? And that's where a lot of people miss out on the juice of life, because they're so afraid and they just know within their heads, oh, it's not going to work, it's a bad idea, and so on. So that's something that we have to all challenge ourselves to do. I challenge you to really look at the fears that you've had and deconstruct them. What's beneath all that? Are you making assumptions? And my gut feeling is you are. That this thing is not going to work. What proof do you have that it's not going to work? What data do you have that it's not going to work? And if I really examine your data, I'll probably find that it's not enough for you to decide to go in that direction. So I want to thank you for listening. If you want to hear more about what I have to say, subscribe to the podcast. Also go to guidedexpressions.com and buy my new book, The Blueprint Visualization System. It is coming out at the end of April in 2020. And I would really be happy if you did that. I think it'll help. I think it'll be amazing. It'll help you visualize more probably than you've ever had, and certainly visualize on purpose, which is the whole point of the book. So I hope you pick it up. My name is Martin Williams. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next time.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Guided Expressions podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify to get all the latest content from Guided Expressions. No one builds a house without a blueprint, so why are you trying to build your dream life without one? That's why the Blueprint course was created. The Blueprint course is for people who know they were meant for more. Created by Martin Williams, the Blueprint is a streamlined way to help you create the life you've always wanted. Get instant access now by clicking the link in the description box or going to guidedexpressions.com/blueprint.